Hello and welcome to all of you joining us from LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm Tony Davila from the Department of Entrepreneurship here at IESE Business School. As we start the new academic year with our alumni series Building Forward, I will be speaking to you today about new approaches to reinventing your company. We aim to make these sessions as interactive as possible, so please send me your questions and comments in the chat fields in either LinkedIn or YouTube. As always, this session will be available for viewing on demand on our LinkedIn page as soon as the session is over. So as I said, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you send me your questions, then we can make this as interactive as we can make it through the online setting. So let me start with what we're going to be talking today, and I want to start with a quote from Winston Churchill. He said, "Success consists of going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm." So we are all going through tough times because of the health crisis as well as the economic crisis that is forthcoming, but we have to have this hope and know that success is at the end of the road. I'm not going to be talking about how to navigate crisis because it's something that a lot of my colleagues have touched upon. What I want to say is that when we come out of this crisis, of this tunnel, the world that we're going to find is going to be very different from the one that we knew when we went in. It's going to be different in that sense. In the past, we would go into a crisis. We would try to manage our cash as good as possible, just hoping that the tunnel would be as short as possible. And when we came out of the crisis, the world was about the same as the world when we came in. So it was just a cycle. Going forward, this crisis, when it's finished, we're going to find a world that is going to be very, very different from the one we knew when we came in, not only from a social perspective, but most importantly, from a management perspective. So very quickly, let me share with you the challenge that we're facing as we prepare to find this new world. There is a couple of very important forces that are shaping the new world. The first one is the increasing number of fast-paced technologies that are hitting the market. And it's not just about artificial intelligence. It's not just about blockchain or any other algorithm that is coming along under the digitalization label. It's a lot of other technologies, from healthcare to materials to biotech to communications. If the world has changed over the last 20 years because just one technology or a couple of technologies, which was Moore's law and the ability to double the capacity of chips every 18 months, the future coming along is going to have the Moore's law, but multiply at least by half a dozen to a dozen new technologies. And the second big macro trend that we have to take into account is the fact that billions of people are joining and have joined the market economy over the last 15 to 20 years. That includes China, Southeast Asia, India. If you add just those three regions, you get more than 3 billion people. And each one of them wakes up every morning thinking about how to create value, economic, social value, and how to upset the existing incumbents, most of them coming from the West. So if you add those two things, what you have is technologies that allow us to create a lot of new strategies and business models, plus 3 billion people that are also thinking about how to create value and how to upset existing incumbents. So what we have at this point is environments that are a lot more dynamic and a lot more complex than they used to be. In the past, we could argue that, of course, environments were dynamic and complex, but it was usually economic cycles, political instability. Today, you have to add to those typical two aspects of complexity the fact that technology is changing very rapidly, and you have doubled the capacity of creation of humanity. So in the past, it was just economic and politics. Now it's going to be the foundations of business, which is technology and business models, how to create value. So what does it mean? what we have is we are moving from what I would describe as stable markets from the perspective of technology and business models. So for almost 100 years, the only worry of Coke was Pepsi, and the only worry of General Motors was Ford. Now, if you look at Coke, they have to worry about a lot of other things. There's tons and tons of drinks that are competing against its position. The same thing with General Motors. If you think about the car industry and all those changes that are happening in the technology, but also startups coming with new business models. So markets and societies are becoming a lot more dynamic. And I'm not going to go into the society aspect, but the COVID crisis has brought into place those changes that were already visible before the crisis. Now they have accelerated dramatically to make a very different world when we come out of the crisis. So even if the markets and society are becoming a lot more dynamic, our organizations are designed for efficiency rather than innovation, rather than creation. It's the metaphor that I use is we have organizations that are like cars. They have huge dashboards, but they have very tiny windows. Why is that? It's because for the last 100 years, the organizations that succeeded were those that were more efficient. So the complexity was inside the organization. Now the environment's a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more complex, but we still drive with tiny windows and very large dashboards. It's interesting, and I believe that that's one of the biggest liabilities of Western countries. We have this legacy of 100 years that we've always associated efficiency with succeeding in the market. The managers that are coming into the market economy, especially from Asia, those managers have been born into very complex and dynamic environments. So they understand that it's the outside is as important as the inside. If you go to China, you see, for instance, in MBA programs, you see the students working in their MBA plus having a half-time job and working at least in one of two startups. They know that the environment is such that you don't know how long your job is going to be, and you know there's lots of opportunities out there. So those people are investing in 3 or 4 opportunities at the same time. So they know that the success is not efficiency anymore, but the success is your ability to identify opportunities and then execute on them. It doesn't mean that efficiency and execution is not important, but it's not a necessary and sufficient condition. You need to know how to create. Okay, so we're facing an interesting management paradox. The world is the way it used to be. We had most of the complexity was inside the organizations. It was about processes. It was about how to work with suppliers, how to work with customers, how to improve the return on any investments that we made. So the complexity of the organization was inside. Over this last century of management knowledge, we have developed very sophisticated operational management systems. And that makes about 90 to 95% of the knowledge that you get in most master in business administration programs or executive programs. It's about how can I scrap an extra 2% of my business model. It's nice and it's good, and we know a lot about it. Actually, a lot of it is commodity knowledge. You can learn it on the web these days. There's always improvements here. So you can think about artificial intelligence, machine learning as a way a lot of times is used to try to improve these internal processes. And it's a good thing to do. We have to try to become as efficient as possible, but we know a lot of it. Now, in the past, the complexity of the environment, as I said, was low. There was political uncertainty, there was economic uncertainty, but it was just kind of a standard deviation around an expected mean. Now, what has happened is that this has turned. Now we have the environment being a lot more complex because of what I said, a lot of new technologies, new business models that those technologies make possible. We have doubled human ingenuity to find new ways to create value. But unfortunately, we don't have the management knowledge to manage this complexity. We lack this knowledge that now we need to deal with this new situation. And the other thing is that it's not only the legacy of 100 years of focusing on efficiency, but it's the fact that, as I said before, when we look at our organizations, what we see in there is a lot of information about what happens inside, but very little about what happens outside, other than what we call the close neighborhood, which is suppliers and customers. So the just the information that we have in the organizations drive our attention to the inside. We pay little attention to the outside. It's done through anecdotes a lot of times, and a lot of times it's we pay attention to it once a year when we do a strategic planning process. And ironically, we use tools from developed back in the 70s and 80s, like SWOT analysis, Porter's five forces, pest analysis. We sometimes use consulting firms for foresight to predict the future, because we believe that the whole thing is about prediction, and then just make sure that you hit those goals that you've set up. Now, the problem with the complexity of the environment is that those predictions are usually wrong by a big margin. So what I argue here is that we have become excellent at execution. We know what's what we need to do to win. Sometimes we do a better job. Sometimes we do a worse job. But in general, we've become very good at execution. So, which means that execution is not anymore a source of competitive advantage. It has been so over the last, again, 100 years, but it's not anymore going forward. Everyone, or all the leading organizations at least, are extremely good at execution. So when we think about companies that had trouble, think about Nokia maybe, or a Kodak, just to use the typical examples. Is not that they were bad at execution, it's just that they totally missed environmental changes. So here I have a question here. So how do economies in developing countries regain their normal position? What will the political ideology to remove the burden on people? So I mean, that's a question that goes into how society is going to change. And again, the same way that technology, the number of technologies that are hitting the market, together with those 3 extra billion people thinking about how to create value, it's going to have a huge impact on how we run societies. So I think there's no clear answer on how either emerging economies, developing countries, more traditional economies like can be Europe, is not clear how society will evolve. It's there's a quote that I like from Schumpeter, that he, back in 1952, he said that that markets is not about administering structures, but about how they create and destroy value and ideas. So I think there's going to be, from a society perspective, there's going to be a trend towards more, let's put, left-wing ideologies, because there's in terms of turbulence, there's always lots of people that suffer in those events. We're going to try to socialize the opportunities going happening outside, but on the other hand, it's what Schumpeter said. At the end of the day, the way we've made a lot of progress is by letting people use their creativity, their willingness to create, to advance. So it's going to be an interesting way to see how we are able to create this economic and social value that has brought us over here over the last 150 years. So there is no answer to which political ideology is gonna allow this new world to emerge. But there's going to be a lot of turbulence in there, in the political field, the same way there's going to be a lot of turbulence in the social field, and there's going to be a lot of turbulence in the business world. It's there's going to be lots of opportunities, but opportunities, if you don't take advantage of them, somebody else will take advantage of it. So they're going to become risks for a lot of people that prefer to try to go back to the old world, to the to what they used to feel comfortable with 20 years ago. Those people are going to suffer a lot, and they're going to have a lot of trouble. I mean, there's ideas like lifetime employment, which I don't think anybody with in their 20s thinks that that's feasible now. But people in their 40s, 50s, even 60s, they feel that this is going to that's what we believed when we were in our 20s. So there's going to be lots of changes, very difficult to predict. But the message here is prediction. Don't trust predictions, because there are so many forces going out there that if somebody tells you a prediction, you can be certain that they're going to be wrong. Of course, if there is 1,000 people making predictions, one of them is going to be right, but it's just pure luck. It's just random distribution. There's going to be lots of changes. Predictions are good just to make you think, as long as you don't believe them. You have to be very attentive to the market. You have to be very attentive to society. Carlos asks if this complex environment, are deregulated industries or geographies more likely to succeed? The more you let creativity and the willingness to create of people work, the easier it's going to be for society to advance. Now, of course, there is always the flip side to this. The more you let creativity and you set up the incentives for people to work hard and to work smart, the more you're gonna have problems in terms of balancing society. There's gonna be more inequality, and you have to address those issues. But it's clear that if you remove incentives for people to create, for people to work, for people to put the effort, you're gonna have a lot less ideas, which means as a region, as a geography, you're gonna have a significant liability when competing to other regions that price this creativity, the talent, education, and effort. So the answer is, from my perspective, you're going to need deregulated industries and geographies, but you're going to need regulation to make sure that inequality doesn't end up upsetting society. Thomas asked me, so what are the critical skills and experience going forward? The critical skills, you need to know everything you learn in your MBA or in your executive program. Execution is still going to be critical, because we need, when you have an idea, when you identify an opportunity, you still have to execute. But going forward, you're going to have a lot more creative thinking, paying a lot more attention to what's going on out there. I think the critical skill, if I had to name one, is learning. That's going to be, it's not like in the past where you learned something where you were in your 20s and that's going to last for the rest of your life. Going forward, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to learn knowledge. You're going to have to learn skills, but you're also going to have to learn to observe very carefully, to experiment, to see what's out there, to pay a lot more attention to what's going on around the world. Because for instance, if we take this idea of China and India and Southeast Asia having 3 billion people waking up every day with the objective of creating value, well, you'll better pay attention to that part of the world and learn what they're doing. So critical skills experience going forward, it's learning, all types of learning. Learn knowledge. If you learn Python, it's good for you. Learn skills. If you learn about, I don't know, UX in the digital world, is good for you. Learn to observe. Go around life with your eyes open, being curious, being questioning why things are the way they are. And finally, learn yourself doing experiments and trying new things. Don't just repeat, hoping that the same outcome is going to happen, because the outside changes, and if the outside changes, the repeating the same thing is not going to bring you to the same results. So what's going to be the next battle? And it builds on what on my my answer to Thomas. The next battle will be becoming excellent at seeing change before anyone else does. So it's not about execution, which we should know. We should keep on learning. Again, it's a commodity. It's available almost everywhere, but it's not going to be your source of competitive advantage. Your source of competitive advantage is going to be your ability to sense what's going on outside. There's this concept that was used by Ramcharan in a Harvard Business Review article back in 2013, which is the perceptual acuity. And he said that's going to be critical going forward. And he defined the perceptual acuity is the ability to sense what is coming before the fog clears. Okay, so he says this is going to be the competitive advantage going forward, learning what's out there and experimenting to take advantage of those opportunities. So here I have Edward says there isn't going to be any old world, not acceptable practice apparently at this stage. Having the ability to adjust and act with agility seems to have a better chance to survive. At the executive level, what other critical skills, abilities to lead steer through this never-ending storm? Well, actually, this never-ending storm, it's a good way of describing what's going on, because it's not going to finish with COVID. It's going to go as we move forward because of those two forces that I mentioned before. I think the ability, from a leadership perspective, the leaders will have to be a lot more open to use the talent that they have in the organization, not only to execute, which is what we've been doing so far, giving OKRs and KPIs to our people, but we need to use that talent for those people to sense what's going on out there. The knowledge at this point is so broad, is so dispersed that it's almost impossible for one person to know and to be able to see what's going on. So from a leadership perspective, you have to rely a lot more on your people, on their talents, on their ability to experiment what's going on out there. The other thing that is going to be important from a leadership perspective is the idea of creating. It's going to be creating is going to be almost as important as executing. It's going to, as I will speak a little bit later of, you need to have those two hats. You need to have the creation hat and the execution hat. And creation comes from a very different set of values than execution, than efficiency. It comes with experimenting. It comes up with trying new things, with failing, with learning from your mistakes. As in the quote that I used at the beginning, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. So that's creation. Creation, it's you're going to have to use a different set of criteria than we've used when we had an efficiency mindset in our in running our companies. So the Javier Relats talks about customer focus, and I haven't talked about customers focus. I haven't talked about customer focus because for me, customer focus, lots of people have already talked about it. And when you think about the outside world, of course, the first thing that you bump into is your neighbors, and your neighbors are your suppliers and your customers. So of course, you need to have customer focus. And if you open up your organization to the outside and you build the equivalent of a car with big windows and tiny dashboards, the customers will be the first thing you bump out there. Of course, understanding that the customer focus is important, but from my perspective, it has been overemphasized. Of course, you need to think about customers, but if you ask customers what they want, they usually will go back to what they know. So there is this experiment out there where customers they show them a new design for a mobile phone. It was round, it was different shape, and you ask customers how would they change it, and if you listen to the customer, you ended up with a traditional iPhone. So customers are very good to listen to them if you want to do incremental changes, because you might find things that can give them a better service or a better product. If you want to go beyond those incremental changes, customers actually are a bad idea. Why? Because they don't know what possibilities new technologies can offer them. So I don't think any customer ever thought about buying online back 25 years ago, when the web was starting to happen. I don't think lots of customers thought about car sharing before they were offered the opportunity to use a car or share a car for a few minutes or a few hours. So customers are good for the neighborhood, for opportunities around your existing business model, your existing technologies. They are bad advisors if you want to go out there. So if you want to go out there, look at technologies, look at startups, look at what they're doing in other countries, in other regions, because the world is extremely rich with ideas. So it's not just customers that have ideas. Sustainability blended view of the economy. That's Maria who's asking my opinion about sustainability. I think it's critical. A lot of the new business models that are emerging are around sustainability. It's going back to customers. I think people are pricing sustainability a lot more than they used to, because luckily we've been able to develop this sensitivity to the sustainability and conservation of this scarce resource, which is the earth. And but again, using these customers wants about sustainability and believes a society about sustainability, that's creating amazing business models. So sustainability is just another force out there that is changing the way we think about opportunities in the market. And if a great example, for instance, is the energy world, and how is it changing in terms of moving towards more sustainability and better conservation of resources. So opportunities are everywhere. As I just put here a few examples of industries that are changing. Education, big changes for, I don't know, at least since the Greeks. The way education was done is 20, 30 people in a room, maybe 100. One person in front of it who was supposed to be the person that knew the most about something, and knowledge was communicated. It's been like this for 3,000 years. As you know today, that's dramatically changing. So now I'm online, and you can learn from me, but you can learn from a lot of your peers. We just talked about energy and how we're talking about renewable energies, autarkic homes, smart grids. Finance, again, you go to a bank and you talk about fintech, and suddenly everybody goes pale, because they are so uncertain about how fintech is going to change finance that well, again, lots of opportunities. Healthcare, same thing. So the lots of changes almost in every single industry. And again, don't just look at customers, look at everything you can look at. Technologies, competitors, companies in other business. If you look at, I don't know, a good example, car industry. If you're Volkswagen and you only look at General Motors and Ford and Renault, sure, you're looking at the wrong tree. It's now it's about Tesla, it's about Google, it's about Amazon. Those companies that they're not car companies anymore, but that's what you should be looking at, because by the time Ford catches up with all those other companies, you're probably going to be late. And so Ignacio mentions, so it would be better to offer solutions to customers' problems. It's you always have to have a value proposition for the customer. So there's always have to be something that the customer appreciates. Now, in some cases, the customer can articulate those needs. In a lot of cases, they cannot. So that's why there is experiments. That's why you try new things and you see whether they work or not, because customers cannot tell you what they want until they experience it. And going back, for instance, to the car example, there is We don't know how people are going to, if autonomous cars ever hit the market, we don't know how people are going to use that service. And I'm sure that now you do a survey on how would you consume autonomous cars. Customers are going to probably tell you something similar to a taxi service. And I'm pretty sure that what's going to happen out there is not going to be a taxi service when autonomous cars come through. So it's you always want to have a value proposition to the customer. Now, the issue, unless it's an incremental change, is that you need to discover what's that value proposition, because customers have a hard time to articulate those propositions. So how do we address the challenge? From some of the work that we're doing here in together with colleagues in Switzerland, is the idea of how do we create those large windows that look at the outside. And it's always the same thing. You want to have information systems at the bottom. Without information, there's nothing to discuss. It's all about opinions that goes nowhere. Then you want to have processes where this information is processed, and then you want to have cultures that are open to what's going on out there. If you think about quality, it's the same thing. You need to have quality information, then you have to have a process where this quality is analyzed, call it Six Sigma, call it quality circles. Then has to be a process. Information itself is not enough. And only through those systems and processes you can change cultures and people think about quality when they take decisions. To have this outside looking perspective, to take advantage of this complex environment, you have to have the information, you have to have the places where this information is discussed, and you have to have cultures where people have this inside and outside looking perspective. So the methodology at the end of the day, it's based a lot on what we know from innovation. So we proactively encourage people to go around life with observing, experimenting, learning from what's out there, engaging with the real world, be curious. Then you have to find the gems among the data. There's going to be a lot of useless information, useless observations, but there's going to be gems out there. Ideas, opportunities is like gold. You have to filter through a lot of earth before you find the gem. But once you find them, you can add a lot of value. You have to have fast cycles, and of course, human interaction is critical. You can use artificial intelligence. It will help you a lot. But at the end of the day, you need the creativity that comes from human interaction. So how do we do this? We have what we call the engine of opportunities. It's a constant process of tactical and strategic insights. What we do is we map the aspects of the environment that we think are critical. We collect observations and experiences with the idea of stimulating creation. Ideas don't come from out of the blue. They don't happen in the shower. They happen because we see things, we experiment things. So the more pieces you have to stimulate creation, the better your ideas are going to be. The next thing is generating insights, which are those ideas. You bring together observations that were unconnected before, and you create opportunities. Then you elaborate into projects and you implement those. And this is something that happens again and again. So it becomes something that's periodic, much like it happens with any other management process. Very quickly, pieces here. As I said, the first thing you have to do is a map. You have to represent what's going on around the organization. This is very much traditional management. If you want to manage a process, you have to map it. If you want to understand an environment, you have to map it. You have to observe and experiment. So the two types of learning that I mentioned before. And again, use the talent throughout the organization, because you have lots of people there that have lots of talent, lots of interest, and understand things that you probably don't understand. You have your own strengths, but also your own weaknesses. You have to use personal observations and experiments. So those are very, very valuable because they are extremely relevant directly to you, but also leverage all the public information out there, whether it's indicators that tell you something about what's going on out there, or whether it's qualitative information like news, like blogs, like tweets, whatever, can give you a hint of what's going on out there. At the end of the day, when you want to inspire people for creation, what you have to do is you have to expose them to new observations, to new information. Insights is the creativity, the spark that happens when out of those experiments and observations, you identify opportunities, you identify trends, you identify those weak signals that indicate there's something happening, something that is going to create an opportunity out there. So just have travel as much as you can, even if it's virtually, because that's where it's those opportunities happen when you see things that shock you. So it's very, very important. It's this idea of creating organizations with big windows, not those tiny windows that we have at this point. And what we have also is what we call this futures meeting. This is the process where all this information makes sense. And what happens in those futures meetings is you discuss the insights, those raw ideas, you elaborate them, because ideas are always born with, well, they are delicate and not too robust. And through those meetings, what you do is you reinforce them and make sure that you can transform those insights into robust opportunities. Another question here is, how do you see talent management when companies are struggling to survive in these trying times? So this question goes back to, so I think we're in the middle of a crisis. A lot of the companies at this point, the number one priority is survival. So they have to do whatever they need to do to survive, but they never have to forget the long term. They never have to forget that at some point there's going to be a world coming out of the tunnel, and the world coming out of the tunnel is going to be very, very different. And the way you're going to adapt to this new world, to this new reality, to this new markets that we're going to find out there, is through talented people, hardworking people, curious people. So you need to keep those people on board, and you have to do whatever you can to keep them, to motivate them, to have them on board. So it's talent management is as critical as always. My only advice there would be, don't be blinded by the crisis and kind of ignore the talent, because when you come out of the tunnel and you have no talent, it's going to be a hard landing. So at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to create these open cultures. So we have here this little person here with two hats, the execution hat and the sensing hat. We need to create those cultures. We need to create cultures where people understand that now they have two jobs: the traditional execution job and this idea of sensing the world, sensing opportunities, because that's where value is going to be created going forward. The same way that we're creating the Internet of Things, we need to create the Internet of People, where every person in the organization is a sensor. And conclusions, we've developed this manifesto. I won't read them to you, but it's those 10 points. Those are the what we believe it's going to change going forward, and how the new management it's going to have to change when we face a world with lots of opportunities and lots of lots of opportunities and lots of changes going on out there. So I have here another question very quickly from Francesc. Is it feasible to re-educate current leaders in the short term or hiring new leaders? That's a very good question. Some of them, it depends. If you have leaders that are curious, that are humble, that are hardworking, they can be re-educated because they have open minds. If you have leaders that want to go back to the past because it's human, we always go back to what it used to work. What it used to work, then those leaders probably will need to be replaced. So we're almost at the very end. There's a couple of questions that I didn't have time to address, but happy to, if you send me an email, happy to respond to them. And just to reinforce this program that we have put together here at IESE. The Building Forward series, which is, this one was part of it, continues next week with 2 very special sessions. On Monday at 7 p.m. Spanish time, there will be a panel of my fellow professors together with Dean Franz Hockham, who will be presenting the new artificial intelligence and future of management initiative at IESE. So next Monday at 7 p.m., join us, because there's going to be a very interesting session on what IESE is doing on artificial intelligence. The second session will be on Tuesday, also at 7 p.m. Spanish time, and we'll take a look at pension plans. We'll have Professor Javier Diaz-Jimenez. He will be joined by Oscar Arce, who's General Director of Economy and Statistics at Banco de España, and José Antonio Erce, President of the Foro Expertos Instituto BBVA in Pensions. And the dialogue will be moderated by Salvador Arancibia from Expansión. And to conclude, just remember that today's session will be available for viewing on demand on our LinkedIn page and YouTube channel for our alumni and the greater IESE community to watch at any time and share. Thanks for tuning in, and take good care. I hope it was useful. See you later.